Welcome to the Microsoft Australia team's OEM webinar for August 2017. In this recording, we'll be covering multiple pieces related to Windows Server and integration with Azure Active Directory. So we'll be talking about several different hybrid scenarios here. So we'll be talking about different ways we can be looking at how we can use Azure Active Directory Connect, which is the connection and synchronization tool from on-prem Active Directory into Azure Active Directory. So we'll talk about those scenarios first, then we'll talk about some of the capabilities of Azure Active Directory for those of you who may only be familiar with it, for example, as the underlying identity system that is used by technology such as Office 365. But obviously it can do a lot more, so we'll spend just a few minutes talking about what its capabilities are as well. Then what we'll do is we'll move on and have a quick conversation around enterprise mobility and security. Some of you may have known this previously as Enterprise Mobility Suite, but it's been rebranded a while ago, and it's still worth revisiting that to see what's included, what options are available, and how that relates to the recently announced Microsoft 365 business product. To wrap up, we'll cover off some upcoming events and then talk about the usual resources that you should be looking at when it comes time to follow up some of the topics we cover in this recording. So first up, let's take a look at Active Directory and Azure Active Directory hybrid scenarios. So before we do that though, let's just talk about why it should be something that maybe is going to be considered. And it's really about extending your on-prem directory into the cloud. So how do we take those user identities as well as allowing users to use that same password with cloud-based applications as opposed to having to go through and have different identities and different passwords as they work across different environments. So as we take a look here, it talks about thousands of apps, one identity. And just to give you an indication, there's just under 3,000 different SaaS apps that are pre-integrated with Azure Active Directory. So it's probably more than likely that the SaaS applications that you need to use have probably already been pre-integrated with a lot of the work already done by Microsoft, which will make it easy for you to integrate with things like your line of business apps, etc., that may already be leveraging SaaS technologies. Now, when we take a look at the different ways we can connect in, we'll talk about some of these in more detail as we go through the rest of the recording today. But really we're talking about using a sync engine. So over time the sync engine has been called different things. At the moment it's called Azure Active Directory Connect, but in the past it's been known as DirSync. It was also Azure Active Directory Sync. There are also more advanced capabilities for people who need multiple directory integration. So they've got capabilities like Forefront Identity Manager, which is also available there. And also, one of the other technologies which we'll talk about briefly as we go through is Active Directory Federation Services, or ADFS. And as that final bullet point here mentions, this is something that's an optional component for authentication when people are looking at hybrid scenarios. But this is something that's really, not necessarily targeting SMB customers unless they've got some very specific requirements. Generally, it's for larger organizations or large-size, mid-sized companies through to enterprise customers. But let's keep going through and talk about some of the different ways that we can do this synchronization. So let's start off just with an overview slide, and what we'll do is we'll go through each of these in a bit more detail. So first off, one of the things that was highlighted in the newsletter in terms of one of the scenarios that may be appropriate for some organizations is just having the users created purely in the cloud. So this is something that you might be thinking, well, if we're talking about hybrid scenarios,